Hi everyone, welcome to today's writing workshop in the Nature Journal Club. I'm Rebecca Rolnick, and I'm so glad to have you here today. So if you'd like, I'd like to invite you to take a minute to write in the chat what's your name or what do you like to be called, where in the world are you, and our question for today is, do you do anything to celebrate St. Patrick's Day? And you're welcome to put your videos on. I like to make this as interactive as it can be, but do whatever makes you feel comfortable. You're also welcome to talk just with the audio and not with the video. And if you'd like to say something at any point, just put up your hand in your video screen like this, or um, or click on the raise hand button. Can everyone hear me today?
Yes.
Great. We've had trouble sometimes. So as I said, I'm Rebecca. I'm from upstate New York, and we don't really do a lot to celebrate St. Patrick's Day in my family, but I am making cold cannon for dinner tonight. So like I said, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, you're welcome to. Hi, Janice.
Hi. Forgot that I was muted when I said hello.
Welcome. We're just
Thank
getting
you.
started, and I'm not
Okay.
sure if you heard. I just said if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, um, where you are in the world, and do anything for St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, okay. In the chat.
Or you can, if you'd like to just speak, you're welcome to, too. Some people are more comfortable writing something in the chat.
Okay.
You don't have to introduce yourself if you don't want to.
Oh, well, I'm comfortable. I'm introducing myself. Yeah, my screen is real full, and this is the first time I've joined you, so I'm just taking a lot in right now. But my name's Janice, and I am from Western Massachusetts. It's people, you say Massachusetts and people tend to think, oh, Boston, but 2.5 hours west of Boston, and I've only been in Boston. I don't think I've even been there a dozen times. I've been nature journaling for years and years and years before I even knew that it was a thing. And I'm a haiku writer.
Oh, that's great.
575 haiku from elementary school, but real haiku, serious haiku. And I just like to write in general.
Great. So, and he looks like Ivea's here. Hi, Ivea. I'm so excited you're here. So we're just getting started. I hope that this is going to be a fun time today. Thank you all for taking the time to be here. This is a workshop all about how to use more words in our nature journals and our writing. So today, because it happens to be St. Patrick's Day on a Wednesday this week, I thought I would find out about a naturalist from Ireland so that we can learn a little bit more about Ireland through some nature writing. This isn't something that I'm particularly knowledgeable about, but I wanted to explore it and share what I found with all of you. So just to get it out of the way, this is a free class for the Nature Journal community, but if you are able to donate any amount, it's greatly appreciated. No pressure at all, though. So if you don't, just if you can pass it on with an act of kindness for someone. Um, Also, if you would like to support me, a couple other things I do, I teach some nature classes online for kids and adults through my own website and through the website Outschool. So now that that's out of the way, so last time we did an activity about interviewing a creature that we want to learn more about, and excuse me, and we talked about empathy and anthropomorphism. And today we're going to talk about an Irish naturalist. The naturalist I ended up learning about is named Mary Ward. And she wrote a book called, she actually wrote a number of books, but her most famous is A World of Wonders Revealed by the, oh, that's supposed to say Microscope. So she was a 19th century naturalist, lived from 1827 to 1869. And as a female naturalist, she didn't really have a formal education or get to go to college, but she learned on her own by reading books, and she would just write to scientists and ask them to send her their publications, and she would correspond with them and, attend whatever talks and things that she could. Um, And her family was pretty scientific, so she was encouraged to learn about science, and she was given a microscope when she was a teenager. So that um, her two main interests were in microscopes and in telescopes. And one of her cousins actually built what at the time was the largest telescope in the world. And she was also a mother and had 8 children, so she had to write in between all of her responsibilities there. But her book was a bestseller, and it was reprinted 8 times and was an influence on popular science writing for decades after that. And so she was really interested in looking at things up close under the microscope. And she doesn't talk about this in her book, at least the book that I read of her, the one we're going to look at today. But it really is a place-based kind of a knowledge, I think, because she zoomed in really close at all of these tiny wonders that she found. And she doesn't talk about the habitat or the wider ecosystem in her book, but it was a product of that ecosystem because where she grew up, where she lived, was right near the Ferbane Bog, which today is designated as a special area of conservation in Ireland. And bogs in Ireland are a distinctive type of ecosystem there. A lot of Ireland is, or at least was, covered by bogs, and so they have a really unique set of species that are found there and are really productive. Just to giving a little context here, bogs also hold a lot of carbon, which means that they're really important for with climate change. They can hold a lot of that carbon in them, and the turf or the peat in the peat bogs can be used for fuel, which a lot of people have because over millions of years, peat could turn into coal, or a lot of the coal that we have originally was peat millions of years ago. So it's actually like a very basic form of fossil fuel that people can use to heat their homes. So now a lot of the peat bogs have been destroyed because they've been used for fuel. So people are, environmentalists there are trying to conserve it, but that is creating kind of a controversy because a lot of people like to use it for heat. And peat bogs also preserve things very well. So there are a lot of some ancient people, like bodies and things, that have been found that archaeologists have been able to learn a lot from just because they've been preserved in the bog so well. So again, this is all just to give a little bit of context. I think it's interesting that this is where she lived and where she studied things, and what everything she learned that she thought was so interesting from there, and now it's this special conservation area today. So this is the book, one of her books, the one I mentioned that was a bestseller. And So I read this whole book, and I'm going to show you a couple of my favorite parts from it. It's written for, excuse me, mainly for children, for schools, and it's written as a letter to a friend. So it's kind of like a personal little tour around her. I don't know if you call it a lab, but where she worked. It's like, I'm going to show you this item and this item. And I think that a lot of older texts can seem kind of dry to us in modern times, but I don't think it is. I think um, she puts in, I think her enthusiasm just shows through really clearly. And honestly, I'm not sure if this is just me because I think I maybe read some more older writings than the average person. So you'll have to see what you think. But I think her writing is still pretty interesting even today. So let's check out this book. And because it was written a long time ago, you can find the whole thing for free online. So this is the book, A World of Wonders Revealed by the Microscope. And it starts out like this. My dear Emily, you have expressed a wish to receive tidings from the world of wonders which surrounds us, and which is revealed only by the microscope. The instrument stands on the table before me, and I proceed to select from among the prepared objects which are placed beside it those which I should probably exhibit to you were you here. They are not perhaps let's kind of skip over that part. She's basically saying we can't look at all those things we could in the summer, but meanwhile, we shall, I hope, find much to interest us in the prepared objects, which are mounted on slips of glass and can be shown in all seasons. And then she goes right into the first topic about the wings of insects. Here are a few preparations of the wings of insects. Have you ever remarked how beautiful they are, how various, and how well adapted to each insect's mode of life? There are very few insects. I'm going to skip ahead to this part actually. My astonishment was not small when I first succeeded in spreading out the wings of a dead earwig, having read in some book that such appendages were to be looked for. So she is describing the wings of the insects, and then she says, to examine this, we apply one of the highest powers of the microscope, so getting really zoomed in. And we now see that the whole surface of the wing is covered with tens of thousands of short, delicate hairs, and fringed with somewhat longer ones. I've drawn a very small portion of the wing as seen with this high power. So she's, this kind of reminds me of what, hi Jen. So today I'm talking about an Irish naturalists because it's St. Patrick's Day. I found about an naturalist named Mary Ward. So I'm reading from her book, which is called A World of Wonders Revealed by the Microscope. And we will have a writing activity a little bit later on. And so I'm just reading from her book to give us a little bit of inspiration. So let me know if you have any more questions. So she's basically saying here she's drawn a little bit of the wings, and then she says, were to represent the entire wing on this scale, I must make it rather more than 10 feet long. Were I to describe all the beauties of insects' wings, devoting myself only to those which are folded up, my letter would stretch to a similarly gigantic length. So that really reminds me a lot of when John Muir Laws talks about like zooming in on a piece, and you only have to draw a little bit of the structure or the pattern. You don't have to show the whole thing. She's kind of doing that here. She's drawn. Oh, I think I forgot to mention too. She did all the illustrations for her own book. She wrote and illustrated it. And I think one thing we can learn here is how her illustrations are very good. They didn't have photographs at the time to be able to show what they were finding under the microscope. But she also uses her writing to expand on that and explain it more. And so she doesn't, um, it's not just like a field guide where she's like, here's this picture, here's kind of just a dry, more physical description of the object. She explains her process of how she uses the microscope, which might be kind of like a guide to the students who are reading it, the feelings of amazement that she has finding things. Sometimes she talks about showing these specimens to other people and their reactions of excitement. Some of the questions that come up for her. She's not just interested in the objects themselves, but how they function and the creature's behavior that's connected to how these things work. And sometimes she also mentions other things that she's read, brings in other information. Sometimes, like, this scientist this says this, but that can't be totally true because this other scientist said this, and microscopes were pretty new at the time, so it was like this whole new world had opened up that she was exploring and then helping other younger students to understand. And yes, this will be recorded. Oh, you put a link to her drawings there. Did you just find that, or did you already know about her? Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead to one of my favorite sections of the book. So she talks about insect wings, um, and hairs of different animals, and all different kinds of things. So, hang on. This part is actually one of my favorites. The feet of insects. I must leave a great many curious objects, and can all of you see this clearly enough to read it? And yeah, her pictures are in the book too, so we will see a couple of those in a minute. So she says, I must leave a great many curious objects without the mention of more than their names, for were I to describe them at length, my letter might become tedious. So I pass over some which I have prepared myself, some which I have seen or heard of, and no doubt there are numerous admired microscopic objects which I have neither seen or heard of, and again a very great number of wonderful structures which no one has yet thought of examining. I had very little idea that my beetle with the comb, and this is something that she describes earlier, a beetle that has little tiny hairs on the wings, and then when she looked close, she realizes that they were actually kind of branched off. Oh no. I was sharing their. I didn't mean to be sharing my notes. I'm sorry. All
I
right.
was going to say, I was going to actually tell you that you're reading from the book, but we cannot see it. It's so
Oh,
beautiful.
thank you for telling me. I'm sorry about that. That's kind of embarrassing.
But you were reading it perfectly, so I don't think we missed anything.
Okay. Um. So she's referring back to this little beetle which she described earlier. She said not. She said I basically she wasn't sure if this had ever been seen before, and she said not long after I first examined this tiny insect, in choosing some microscopic objects at an optician's, I found one of the curious feathery wings duly prepared and labeled the wing of Trichopteryx atomaria, and Trichopteryx means hairy wing. I do not know whether its comb has ever been detected, possibly not, as the little wing case at the base of which it is placed is a good deal arched, and it was by accidentally tilting up this wing case that I discovered the comb. So she's saying what she's observed, she's not sure if anybody has ever observed it before. Among the most curious objects for the microscope, which comprise remarkable parts of insects and other living creatures, and which I have not already described, are the stings of wasps and bees, the horns of moths, the beautiful spiral tongues of butterflies and other insects, the lancets of the gnat, the skins of caterpillars, the proboscis of the fly. In short, there is an excellent book on the as an excellent book on the microscope says, there is scarcely a part of the body of an insect that does not exhibit some remarkable structure. Many shells and their inhabitants are also interesting objects for the microscope. In larger animals, most curious preparations have been made of thin slices of their horns, hoofs, bones, and hair. I mean that a way has been contrived for making sections of hairs, and their real shape may be ascertained. And then she basically says, well, I'll just read it. You may be sure that the vegetable world has supplied numerous and beautiful objects for the microscope. I have too few of these, but my letter would be incomplete without a short description of them. I will tell you about them presently, but will first finish my account of the animal world with 3 very curious feet. Those of the spider, fly, and boat fly. So then she's describing the spider's foot, how it helps the spider to hold on its the teeth enable the spider to lay hold of its web and glide along it without danger of slipping. They answer the same purpose as the rough nails which are put on horses' shoes in frosty weather. So as she's doing kind of we talked about I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. So she does a lot of things that it reminds her of in this book, which I think helps to make it relatable to the students she was writing for. And then she writes, what a different foot is the fly's. I dare say you have seen representations of it in books, and may have read some rather different accounts of its nature. Naturalists have always wished to explain how flies can walk up a window or even upside down on the ceiling of a room, and there is no doubt that the curious flat appendages at the last joint of the foot enable them to do so. These appendages appear to be of the quality of parchment and airtight, and almost all books on natural history tell us that they are suckers, that the air presses on them and that no air can get under them, as a vacuum is formed beneath the raising of their central parts. There appears to be much said in support of this theory, and the sucker is an instrument by no means unknown in nature. The feet of a lizard, called the gecko, are supplied with a contrivance of the kind, and this is also the case with some of the water beetles. I have seen one of them hold on quite tightly to the edge of the basin by means of the suckers on its feet. It would appear, however, that the fly cannot support its position entirely in this way. An acute observer of nature, Mr. Blackwell at Manchester, noticed that flies under the glass of an exhausted air pump were still able to adhere to it, and in fact could not be detached without the employment of a small degree of force. Renewed investigations have tended to revive in some degree the old opinion, and then she just gives this other theory. But I think it's interesting because she's not just looking at the structure itself, but she's thinking about how does this work? And some scientists think this, but that can't be the whole story because, there's so much that they're just trying to figure out at this time. And so here are a few of her illustrations of the spider foot and some of the other feet and all of these insects. And then I just want to skip to this part because I think this is kind of funny. Where did it go? So she says some more about the spider and the fly and the boat fly feet, which to her are really interesting. And then she says, to the petals of flowers. I'm sorry that I have but few specimens of this, which to many persons would be the most interesting class of objects. And so one thing that's been noted about Mary Ward is that her writing was a little bit more feminine. It was supposed to be for kids and for girls especially. A lot of her specimens she compares to domestic things like lace or buttons. But I think this about the flowers says some different story to me. I think it kind of suggests that she's like, it's too bad that I don't have that many flower specimens, but she's only spends 1 page of the whole book talking about flowers and a huge section of the book talking about insects. So I think that suggests to me she was a lot more interested in the insects. And that ties back, I think, too, to where she lived close to the bog, which is such a place to find interesting and diverse insects that I think probably really inspired her. Okay, and I just want to show you one more part. She starts talking about the pollen of flowers. And she says the pollen of Salvia potens is flat and round. Shall I mention a ridiculously far-fetched comparison which always occurs to my mind in looking at it? The disk of the planet Jupiter with its belt stretching across. Only here there are scores of bright golden Jupiters on the deep blue ground of the lovely flower in which they are often scattered. So this is the drawing of this one, which she's referring to, which kind of looks like Jupiter. And I think that's really interesting because, as I said, I notice and I wonder, and it reminds me of in our nature journals. And so she has a lot of these things that it reminds her of. And because she was really interested in the microscope, but she was also really interested in telescopes and making observations of the planets and the stars, that the fact that she would see Jupiter in this, I think, is really interesting. And it definitely sticks in your mind. It's a lot more memorable than if she had just said it's yellow and has stripes on it. The fact that, oh no, if you look really closely, it's like full of Jupiters, I think is really interesting. So, does anyone have any impressions or thoughts from her writing? So, I just read you a couple portions from her book, and she wrote and illustrated all of this, and you can see a lot more of her drawings. But was there anything that anyone liked or disliked about her writing? Anything you thought was interesting? Again, this is pretty old-fashioned, so is there anything that you would want to mimic in your own writing, or anything that you disliked? And for those of you who have been here before, we've read some writing from Rachel Carson and from Aldo Leopold. Do you think of anything that compares or contrasts with those writers? Ivea.
One thing I really liked that you mentioned is that she compares it to a lot of things that you find in household items, like what you said about lace. And I noticed you mentioned parchment at one point, or vacuums. And so what that makes me think of um, is like that she was taking her audience, or her intended audience, into account. And I've been wondering for a long time how to make my nature journals, or to find some sort of way to bridge the gap for kids who live in the inner city and who may not have access to as much nature. And so what you pointed out about her inspires me to think, maybe if I do, it reminds me of to things that the kids can relate to from the inner city. And so to be really, really mindful of that. I really like that practice. So thank you for that. I think
Yeah, so
that's
she brought her observations too, and especially at the time, I think microscopes were, they were becoming a lot more used in science, but they were, to the average person, I think they were still pretty new. Like, this was a whole new way of seeing the world. Like, it's just amazing that I think sometimes we can almost take for granted, but the fact that things look totally different if you look at them super, super up close. And I think she did a really great job of being able to bring that to people. And the fact that I think there's kind of the writings complement the drawings really well. Like her pictures are very good, but with the writing, she's able to get so much more information and a little bit of a story to it than if it were just the pictures. Does anyone else have any thoughts about it that you'd like to share? That's all right if you don't have anything to say. Well, I hope that that was at least somewhat enjoyable to all of you. Oh, I forgot. I was going to show you also this like 1 minute video about the bog. That's where she lived. So let me see if I can share my sound. There we go. Can you guys hear this?
part of the Living Bog project, we're restoring Ferbane Bog here behind me. It's one of 12 raised bogs across 7 counties that we're restoring,
Can you
thanks
see
to
it?
the EU's LIFE programme and the Department of Culture and Heritage. The Living Bog is restoring
Yes.
raised bogs throughout the country, bringing back one of Europe's oldest near natural ecosystems. We're blocking drains, we're making the bogs wet again, allowing them to reawaken and regrow. Raised bogs are among the last habitats for hundreds of species. You know, many of the rare plants, many rare birds, many rare spiders, invertebrates, you name it. So we're bringing back that habitat, and in turn we're already seeing some species return to these raised bogs. Practically every raised bog in the country has been drained at some point, and the project sites the Living Bog is working on, it's no different. Every one of our bogs has wide drains bringing water off the bog. We bring on specialists in machines who block the drains. They take some peat from the bog and they put it back into these drains, which keeps the water on the bog. After restoration, it's hoped that as well as the wildlife returning to these bogs, they can be used as an amazing educational resources for schools and colleges. We can develop community-led amenities such as boardwalks and woodland trails. The future there's so many possibilities in the future for these sites. Raised bogs store more carbon than any other habitat in Ireland, but we're down to our last 1% of active, growing, living raised bogs. So projects like ours will really help in the fight against climate change by keeping that carbon locked into the ground.
So again, that's just to give a little more context for her naturalist studies and her writing. I think that the fact that she was so interested in insects, I would suspect has something to do with the fact that she lived near a bog, which has so many amazing and diverse insects to learn about. So what I was thinking for our writing activity today, we've talked, for those of you who've been here before, we started out talking about writing to observe and writing to think. We've talked about using writing as a tool to help us learn, not just as, something that to present to other people or something that has to be pretty. And but I'm thinking today, based on her writing, we could take a little dip in writing to communicate. So again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be like anybody else's style. It can be in your own style and your own voice. But let's think about, we've talked about the sense of wonder and, exploring that for ourselves individually, but how can we use writing to share that sense of wonder with somebody else, especially a younger person? Or to a friend, if you wanted them to feel that same sense of amazement that you feel. So I think, why don't we all pick something from our nature journals that we've observed that we thought was really amazing, that made us feel a sense of wonder of some kind, and that we'd like to share with somebody else. So it could be something really small and up close, even under a microscope if you've had the opportunity, but it doesn't have to be. And I really like Eve's idea about doing that. It reminds me of based on your audience, or you just said that more clearly. I thank you for that. Um, so if you could think about who you want to write it to, so this could be a specific person who you know, or it could be just generally a certain group of people, like Eve mentioned, inner city kids, or something like that. And if you could think of, it reminds me of, for your object that would be relatable to that group of people. And then I think if we could write a paragraph or two about the object, kind of how she had, she had the descriptions of the object explaining what it is and what it was like, but then also a little bit more about why it was interesting to her, or some of her thoughts or ideas about it, or other research. Does that make sense? Does that sound like fun to everyone? And of course, you're always welcome to just kind of do your own thing if you want to, and then we'll have a chance to share in a few minutes. Does anyone have any questions or any other thoughts about what we're going to do now? Sharon, were you raising your hand or were you just getting your notebook? Thanks.
I was just trying to say, no, that sounds good to me.
Oh, great.
I should have given it 2 thumbs up instead of a wave.
Thanks, Sharon.
Can I say
Yvette?
something?
Yeah,
Can I say something really fast about the video that
yeah,
was,
yeah.
it made me wonder because I hadn't realized just how that it was considered a rare environment. I mean, it makes sense, but I hadn't really thought about it, about the bogs being rare. And so I thought it would be really neat if anybody lives nearby where Mary Ward lives, it'd be really cool if they tried to go to the same areas where she lived and see if the insects that she cataloged are still there.
That would be really cool. Yeah, and I don't think it used to be such a rare ecosystem. It used to be a lot more of Ireland, but because people have harvested the heat or harvested the peat to use for heat for several hundred years now, there are less and less bogs than there used to be. So I think you might have come in after I was explaining that about that, Eva, but it seems to be kind of a controversy in Ireland because I think environmentalists want to protect the bogs, but then the people who have been using them want to keep using them. And yeah, and there are bogs in the United States too. I've been to a bog that's in New York State, and it's really cool because it's like all of the moss and organic material creates this layer on the surface that you can but it's just water underneath, but you can walk across and find all kinds of interesting things there. So let's take about 10 minutes to work on our writing. So again, pick something that you've observed from your nature journal, and um, you can keep just working on writing as to observe and to think if you want to as a tool for your own learning. But let's try to start writing something that would be explaining it and sharing it with someone else to help them have that sense of wonder, and especially comparing it to things that might be interesting to them. Okay, I'm going to put a timer on for 10 minutes and then we will have the chance to share our writings if we want to. So that's been 10 minutes. Did everyone get the chance to write at least a little something? Okay, so everyone can have a chance to share if you'd like. I'll go first, just because I know that it can be kind of scary to share your writing, even for me. So I just, you know, I want to show that I'm doing it too. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, as these are just first drafts and they can always be made better later. So I wrote about some birds that I saw, and you might have seen this nature journal. Hang on. You might have seen this nature journal page for me if I posted. I went looking for things that look like circles because it's Pi Day. So I found some birds that I was examining this weekend, and so I wrote about that. And I wrote, birds are well known for their sticky grip, attaching onto any human or animal who happens to brush past it, and tagging along as a stowaway. But they have a whole life growing as a growing living plant before that too. Do you ever wonder why they stick onto us so stubbornly? What's the point of doing that? They are well known for being the inspiration behind Velcro. If you look really close under a magnifying glass or microscope, these porcupine spine hairs on the bird have tiny little hooks that allow them to stick to any hair or fur or clothing. In fact, I got home from a walk this weekend where I observed some birds, and upon taking off my winter hat, I found a burr perched on top. I must have been walking for a while with it there, completely unaware. So anyway, why do they do this? Well, another burr I observed gave the answer. This one, the ball was partially cut or fallen away, revealing that it was full of seeds inside, packed as tightly and neatly together as a box of 64 Crayola crayons. Each one could be viewed from the top, an oval with a tiny circle in the center. The mysteries normally obscured by the spiky covering were revealed. So that's what I wrote in the past 10 minutes. And one of the what I really like is that comparison that came to me near the end, that it was similar to a big box of crayons that all packed together. So would anyone else like to share what you came up with during the last 10 minutes?
Can I?
Meenakshi?
Yes, yes. So I am absolutely new to this. I don't even have a journal. I need to still buy a journal. So I just grabbed a notebook. So that's my balcony. And I just moved to this new condominium, and at the back of it, there are so many trees, and I hear so many different kinds of birds all day round. Like I used to be able to do that in my previous apartment also, but somehow this space is much more mystical in that sense, that I hear so many bird calls all day around. And I do not know anything much about birds. To be, I am not like a naturalist like you. I'm just trying to become one. I really getting interested in these things now. So I just wrote something which were like mostly questions, like who are these birds? I don't know. When I go out and I look at them, at the trees, I don't see them. I hear them all day, and they get my attention all day around, but I don't know where they are hiding. And I wonder if these birds know each other, like if they are friends or their neighbors or their rivals. I just started counting one day the calls, and I could count 5, and then they just merged into one another. And I kept on wondering if it was the sound of the same bird, or it was the same species but a male and a female, or they were all different kinds of birds, but they were like all singing as a symphony in this backyard of mine, right? And it's so amazing because I wonder if they just come in during, certain times during the day, or they are there all day, because I do feel that I hear certain calls at certain time of the day and not other times. So there is this one bird I'm so curious about. They do definitely come during one time during the day as a flock. And I was thinking it was an owl, but I'm not sure. but they all make sound together, and then they just go, and then they come and make sound together, and they just go, and they do that like twice a day. So I'm just in so much mystery and awe about all these birds in my backyard. And I feel that they have, I don't see them. I don't have binoculars, and I don't really got the time to go out and sit on the balcony and see them. I would love to do it, and I don't have binoculars, but I do feel that they have kind of elevated my sense of listening for sure, because I noticed them by listening them. So it wasn't so poetical, and my drawings are not so good, but I'll get there. I'll get better.
And that's okay. Well,
Those
thank
are
you.
so many trees, and this is my balcony.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, so they don't have to be pretty or perfect. The point is to
Yeah,
get information and
They just hide somewhere. I know they're there, but I don't see them. I hear them, but I just don't see them. So I'm like just showing them they're hiding somewhere in the trees. So they are mystery to me.
Yeah. That's the great thing about being a naturalist, though, is we don't. Oh, hi, my cat says hi. We don't have to know the names of everything to be able to learn more about them. Because there's so many things in nature, we can't possibly know all of their names all the time. And so you're asking such really good questions, and you've already paid such close attention. So you are a naturalist. Congratulations. You don't have to be, worry about being as good as anyone else or having exactly the same style as anybody else. You can make up your own style as you go along and just follow whatever is you think is curious, whatever makes you curious.
Yeah, and I was telling I don't know how to say your name. Yvea.
Ivea.
Evea. Oh, that's a beautiful name.
Thank
So
you.
I was telling Evea yesterday that I'm being present in all sessions that you're offering, in all events, because I'm trying to do this myself, and I'm also doing it with a group of my pre-service teachers in my undergrad course. So I told them that you are going to do few activities from nature journaling, and I'm going to do these activities with them. So that's something I'm really excited about for the next few weeks.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. We have a few minutes left. I can also stay. I will stop the recording at 1. I know people probably need to go, but I can stay a little bit longer if anyone would like to share, or if you'd like to share not on the recording. So I see share. LK, what about you?
So right now I just wrote a haiku, and I did it in my nature journal.
Oh, cool. Would you like to read it out loud, or I can read it? I can see it clearly enough there, I think. You wrote woodpeckers pecking, sparrows singing softly here.
Mm-hmm.
Hawks cruise the sky above. I really like how you put your observations of all those different birds and what they're doing into a haiku. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being here. Sharon, what did you do? You're muted.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So a few days ago, I drew these pictures of the dogwood branches in my garden, and they're not blooming yet, they're still a long way off, but I so look forward to when the blossoms open. So this is what I wrote today. I visit the dogwood more and more frequently as winter drifts away and spring approaches. Sometimes the spring is born on violent winds, and at other times on soft breezes. The branches stand in an array, reaching to catch the light, like a person sending or a person reading, holding their book beneath a bright lamp to better see the small print. Let's see, buds of the sleeping flowers are covered with what looks like little green and brown wrapping paper bits with a twist at the top. What signal are they waiting for to break the wrapper and unfurl petals with centers that look like the fingers of tiny yellow rubber gloves with intermittent bits of cheese held aloft by slender toothpicks?
Thank you for sharing that, Sharon. I really like.
So I was following Evea's lead, saying, well, what am I seeing in my home? What's around me? And so I try to use the rubber gloves and the cheese on toothpicks as an image that would be familiar.
That's great. Yeah, I think there definitely is something to, if we can compare it to things that people are familiar with, that can help that image to stick more clearly into their mind, or sometimes help them care about it a little bit more. It could be more relatable. Would anyone else like to share? Ivea?
So I really appreciate this workshop because I've been trying for a long time to do my secret plant for my son because I'm trying to get him gently more into nature journaling. And so this helped me come up with some really good descriptions of the secret plant I'm going to do for him in ways he could understand. So I'll read it while I hold up the secret plant. Leaves feel a bit scratchy, like a kitty's tongue or Velcro. Tips slightly burnt, like Pop-Tarts put in the microwave for too long. Yet from a distance, the hairs on the leaves look grayish white like a mouse. Oval-shaped leaves like our cat's eyes. As the leaves die, brown seeps into green, like a coffee stain on mint ice cream, or maybe green tea ice cream. It's a warmer shade of green. And that's all I've got so far, but it really helped me get started. Thank you.
Oh, those are so many great comparisons. And I really like how you're bringing this into that, the secret plant activity, to give, using it to not just here's the object and now I'm going to tell you about it, but you're making it into clues that could help your son figure out what object or what plant it is.
Thank you. I think you're muted.
Did you hear what I just said then about how I liked how you did the clues?
Oh,
For the
yeah, I
object?
heard you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I just think it's 1 o'clock. So if anyone needs to go, you can go. And thank you so much for coming. I can be here for a few more minutes if anyone wants to share more or to talk about what we learned today. And like I said at the beginning, if you are enjoyed this workshop and you're able to donate even a little bit, it's greatly appreciated. Or pass it on with an act of kindness. No pressure at all. Do whatever makes you happy. And I put the link in the chat if you'd like to. But again, no pressure at all. I'm just really glad that you're all here and we can all enjoy learning about nature and words together. And learning from each other.